This is my portrait sketchbook, where I do portraits of people that I know, friends, family, just people that are dear to me. And these are two of my favorite pages, very special pages that I have in this book. This is a very dear friend of mine, Avetis Kartikashian, an amazing artist, and like I said, a very dear friend of mine. And we actually got to work on this together. Before I talk more about the work, I'm going to refer to him as Avoza. I can't call him Avo. I was brought up differently to always respect my elders, and for the life of me, I can't call him by his first name. So I call him Avoza, and it translates to Uncle Avo, but in Armenia we grew up saying Zads or Za to male elders and people that we came across. So I will refer to him as Avoza for this session of Page Within the Sketchbook. So I just wanted to clarify that before I continue. But like I said, this was a very special page for me, and I really wanted to try to capture his portrait. And after I was done with his portrait, he worked on the other side of the page. So it was an honor to get to do this one. Avoza is one of my favorite people in the world. And, again, getting to draw him was very special for me. I only draw people that mean the world to me. And for all the other people that I haven't drawn, who mean the world to me, I'll get to you at some point. But it's also the face. I'm trying to capture a face. I want to see if I can accomplish that goal, of capturing that specific person. But I met Avoza at the building we live in. Immediately when I saw him, I felt like I knew him. He's an old soul, and I felt like we've crossed paths before in our past lives, and that's kind of how I felt when I saw him. It's like I look at him and I'm like, I know you. We've seen each other before. We were friends again in some other life, and some people in your life, that's how you feel about them. Where you're like, we've been through other lives together. We've been flying through the cosmos together, and we get lucky and we come across each other in these different lives, and that's who he is for me. I feel like we've been through a lot of things together. He is an incredibly kind human being, and anyone who knows him will tell you the same thing. He's a very loving and caring person, and that's why I wanted to draw him. I wanted to see if I could capture that face, the way that I feel about him, the energy that he gives off. He's the type of person that if he sees you, it's open arms. He hugs you. Will talk to you about you. He's not interested in talking about himself. He wants to know you, and that's rare. Not a lot of people like that these days. So, when I see him, we talk art, talk a lot of art. He's an old school artist. He's an artist's artist. That's who he is. He just wants to feel the paint, be in front of the canvas, just draw, create. That's life for him, And so, we have a lot of things in common, and just to get to talk with him is always such a delight. So I wanted to draw this human, this person that I love so much. And that's how this portrait came to be. And when I did start this portrait, I wanted to start it in a way that would make him proud, that would be a real, how do I describe this? But you know, a way of starting it that only another artist, a real, true, crazy type of person, crazy type of artist, an artist, not a person, but a crazy type of artist, would appreciate. You know, where you can take the traditional steps to complete it, make your life easier, or you can go about it in the most kind of awkward way or absurd way possible, chaotic way possible. And of course, that is something that I enjoy. So I started the portrait with just a smudge. And my goal was to figure out the portrait from that smudge. I took graphite, and I don't remember if it was powder or if I just, while I was sharpening the pencil, if I had a pile of graphite. And I just kind of smeared it in that area that I was going to find him from. And that's how I started it. You know, again, I kept thinking about him. How would he start it? How would he want me to start it? When we talk to each other about art, we're always talking from a very, you know, from a very experimental place, right? So that's kind of our conversations about art are very much about, you know, how to continue to experiment and trying new things and, you know, technique and all this stuff. So I wanted to start this in a very, from that experimental kind of place, and also a way that would make me uncomfortable. I didn't want to just draw another portrait. I didn't want to do the same thing that I've done before. If I wasn't going to learn something from this, and I didn't want to do it. And I certainly didn't want to do something that wouldn't be up to his standard, I guess. So that was my mindset going into this. So I started with that smudge, and I was determined to find his portrait from there. And that's kind of how it came to be. You know, again, trying to do less than I usually do, even though it is still a very detailed portrait. There are things that I try to do that I normally don't. I'm not as experimental with graphite, with traditional kind of portraits like this, as I am with my paintings. Because the idea is to capture the face, the human that I'm drawing. And so the way that I experiment isn't necessarily the finish of the work, but rather just the process that I go through. So that was the experiment for this portrait.
Could you talk a little bit more about the technique you used when you did this portrait of Abuja?
Yeah, the technique, again, it's fairly straightforward. As far as the technique goes, when I use graphite, when I'm drawing with pencil, you know, or charcoal, the goal is to approach it like a painter. So instead of, you know, the pencil is a paintbrush, you know, and so that's how I look at it. I don't want it to look like a pencil drawing. I want it to look like a painting. And so when I you know, I'll use the eraser. You know, we always, I tell my students, we always think of the eraser as something to correct a mistake to erase that mistake, start again. For professional artists, they'll tell you the eraser is not. Yes, of course, it is an eraser, but it is like using lighter values. It is taking a paintbrush and having loading it up with those highlights, and adding the light. And so that is how we use the eraser. And in this, for this portrait and many of my other portraits, the eraser becomes this. I have to use the eraser, I have to use the pencil like I would a paintbrush. And so I'm thinking of the strokes that I'm making, because the pencil and the eraser, these are small, tiny, they make tiny marks. We have to build up to that larger stroke. Although with the eraser, you can have different shapes and allow it to be used like a larger paintbrush. And so I was really trying to push that technique of, approaching a graphite drawing like I would my paintings. And there are areas where it's successful, there are areas where it could use improvement. And I looked back at this portrait and I try to figure out what those were, so when I do another one I can correct those. But honestly, there's even those imperfections I really like. So the technique is, it is a very traditional approach, but I am approaching it as like a painter. Now, once I completed my part, something that was very important for me was to work with him. So we do a piece together in a sense. And generally, artists are reluctant to allow other people to work in their sketchbook and all that stuff. But, this is not a regular person. This is a master artist. Decades and decades and decades of creating and working in the field of art. Vast knowledge. And so if I was going to have anyone draw in my sketchbook, it was him. Even though there are some pages in here drawn by people who aren't really artists. I actually have a couple pages that my son William did, and that's fun. But it was something that I really wanted to do, was to work on this sketchbook with him. Now, I can't really speak about his part of the page. That's for Avoza to speak about. But, he gave me more respect than I wanted him to while he was working on that page. I wanted him to kind of just go wild on it. But again, he's an extremely respectful, loving man. So, of course, he was cautious about his approach. But I absolutely love what he did. He's an abstract artist. Again, he's an all-around artist. He can paint and draw anything. But, and his current work is very much abstract. And so I didn't know what I was going to get when I gave him the sketchbook and he gave it back to me. But I was so happy to see his loose, line work. And, he brought there's a lot of air, a lot of breath he brought into the portrait. That's clearly the better part of the collaboration. But that's what this page, these two pages are, is a collaboration of two artists, one better than the other. And of course, I don't have to tell you who's the better artist, but I got to draw him. So, it was a very fun page to work on. And for me, it's, when I do portraits of people, it's a little bit of a page in a diary. And without using any words, this was my entry for him. So yeah, this was, it's one of my favorite pages in this book, and I hope that we get to collaborate more on other artworks, and hopefully soon we will. But yeah, I hold no dream of fortune vast, nor seek undying fame. I do not ask when life is past, that many know my name. I may not own the skill to rise to glory's topmost height, nor win a place among the wise, but I can keep the right. And I can live my life on earth, contented to the end, if but a few shall know my worth, and proudly call me friend.